Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Edleen. I'm just going to stop sharing the title slide and just put up myself on screen for a while, so you can have a brief moment of seeing who's talking to you. Hope it's there. Hope that's showing up now. Welcome to this session, which is rapidly growing in number. I notice we seem to have 21 participants now. I will be probably having to recap at some point for people who are joining us late. You should have found, as Adeline pointed out, the resources tab. It's very important you download the materials as we were making reference to them. If you're having any difficulty, she has just posted in the chat box, right, a WeTransfer link instead, another way. Someone's not audible. Can we just check? Are people hearing us okay? Just put in a chat if you're okay. If not, put in problem. A couple of other people. I think, Mohammed, the problem is at your end, as other people seem to be able to hear it. And you could, obviously, if you can't hear me, there's no point in me telling him, is there? Thank you, everyone else. Adeline, could you put a chat in? Can you send him a direct message as well and tell him that's the problem is there? Okay. Right. Now, today's activity is part of two. We have a training session today and on Thursday. They divide into fairly clear parts. Today's session is more about the getting ready to teach, getting it prepared, sorting it out, how the thing is structured, looking at the content, and a brief look at some of the questions. Whereas Thursday's session is almost exclusively on actually how do you mark everything and what's good marking, what's poor marking, decisions do you make, and so on. So that will be how it divides up anyway. I have a poll for you, and I should point out, sorry, this is the first year of using Zoom for these meetings, and it has, whilst it's a much better platform for doing lots of things, it does have a few problems for people who are doing IT and computer science, in that it doesn't handle unusual files, and we'll come back to that later. Anyway, we have a poll, and we should be able to post it now, hopefully. Cancel that. Right, here it goes. Could you answer the question one? Ignore question two. I just couldn't get it out of the system. So could you just quickly answer to question one, please? Are you already delivering this qualification? No, but will be next year, or just looking. Ignore the second question. It doesn't mean anything. Just waiting to see how we're going. Is that everybody? It looks like we've got a lot of shy people or people who presumably can't use chat and polls. Can we just give it a bit more? Because it'd be nice to hear. Mohammed is still stuck, Adeline. Okay, I take it the others of you are either very shy and don't want to put anything up or whatever. I don't mind, it's fine by me. But obviously most of you, looking at the poll, about 2/3 are already delivering, and of the other third, it's split fairly easily between those but who will be doing it next year and a few who are looking. Okay, thank you for that. Right, in that poll. Good. Now then, second thing that's handy for me, please, in the chat, would you please put in, if you want to, this is not compulsory at all by any means, would you please put in the chat where you're from, the country you're from, please? It'd be just handy to know. It's always useful to see where we're going. And secondly, if you've got any specific requests you want, what you would hope to get out of here today. You may not have anything, just put your country if it's the case otherwise. All right. But it's just interesting to see where people are from. Thank you. Just wait for a couple more people to put where they're from. Okay, we seem to have the same distribution as we've had for the computer science. Right. It's lovely. Keep adding those there if you will, people. I'll go back over that in a bit. Have a look. Okay, so how are we going to do things today? There is only me and Adeline. The two of us are trying to handle this whole thing. If there are any technical issues, then Adeline will look at those and try and solve them. Okay. If there are any other questions you want to put to me, put them into chat. But can I ask you to stop and not just do it just yet? Write down your question if you suddenly think of something, because I know what happened. You can easily forget about it. And then I'll give you some opportunities during the session when I will be stopping talking and you can put in a question while other people are doing an activity, and then we can answer your questions. That seems to have worked very well for the sessions I did last week. So I hope the same. But otherwise, don't use chat. Just listen. If you think of something, oh, I really want to ask that, then write it down, okay? And then when we say we're having a pause for an activity, then you can put your question in chat and get it. And I'm thanking you for people who are putting down what they'd like to get out of the day. That was good. And some excellent answers coming up there. That's brilliant as well. Thank you, everybody. Okay. I think that's it. I'm afraid you're going to lose my beautiful visage now because we can't do everything. There's not enough bandwidth for some people. So I'm going to stop the video and we're going to share the slides and we're going to get started. And hopefully you can now see our title slide. Okay. Aims and objectives of today. We're going to look at the content of the qualification. We're going to look at how we might plan it and lessons. And we're going to look at the overall practical side of doing the assessments of the qualification and preparing students. Then on Thursday, we'll look at actual assessment and how we assess the work and so on there. Right. Here's our brief agenda. Some idea of what we've been doing. We're going to look at content, then we're going to have an activity. We're going to look at how we might plan to teach it and deliver it, and then another activity. We're going to look at assessment, awarding marks, preparing students, good practice, and what support, which is quite a lot available for you. Okay, that comes up at the end there. We will be going for about 2 hours, but there will be a couple of short breaks in the middle of this. I'm appreciative that some of you are joining us at the end of a working day. It's been a hard day probably, and you'd like to sort of pace yourself. So we're not going to rush today. We would be rushing a lot more on on Thursday when there's a lot more to do. Okay, just a quick welcome from Pearson's, who are leading our company that runs us. Pearson Edexcel, you may know us under either of those headings really. We have, as Edexcel, what was originally London Qualifications, a history that goes back 150 years in assessment. And we are the UK's largest awarding organisation for UK qualifications. Okay. The spec, which is part of your download, if you're new, the few of you looking, you've got a copy of the spec downloaded, and please would you make sure that's available to look at later on. If you're already delivering, I am assuming you are familiar with the spec and you've got a copy with you. If not, you can get a copy out of the document downloads on the website, and that's straightforward there. Can I just check, is anyone having trouble accessing the documents? You've all worked that out. I am assuming, as you all are IT teachers, that it wouldn't be a problem. Yeah, it looks like it. Great. Okay, what else is there? Those of you just looking, and we point out there's an awful lot of support materials for you. And as time goes on, of course, more past papers. So when we first produce a qualification, one of the things we do is we issue SAMs, which are sample assessment materials. And these are to give you some idea of how work might appear, how the exam papers might appear, and to give you some questions to work with your students. Okay, and having done those, then usually after a couple of years, we then produce the ADSAMs, which are additional sample assessment materials. All right, and they are just the same as the SAMs, just they will produce at a later point in the qualification. But all those are also supported by question papers, mark schemes, and sometimes exemplified marking, right? So we do also have examples of, well, not just the mark scheme, but also some candidates' work and how it looks. So they're sample assessment materials, and this is also where, if you're looking, you're going to find the data files that you need for paper 2 and paper 4, or unit 2 and unit 4. That's for the practical papers. That's where the data files will also be kept for the sample assessment materials. Exemplar material is much more valuable, of course, because that has commentaries from an examiner. So when you're looking for these materials, then the great thing about them is they are there for your examiners to look at and so on. Finding this stuff on the Pearson website may not be that easy, because unfortunately, if you just try doing a Google search for ICT A-level, you often end up just being offered the textbook. But if you persevere and go into the Pearson site on the highest level and then burrow down, you'll go through international qualifications and then to ICT, you'll find the page. And later in the session today, I will show you an example of what the page looks like. Okay, hopefully I haven't gone too fast there. I thought that was all pretty straightforward stuff, but if there's anything you need to ask later, do so. Okay, we have a qualification, and any qualification has to have assessment objectives. In other words, what are we trying to assess, test? For the IT qualification, right, we have 4 assessment objectives, and they increase in complexity of skill, if you like, or ability. So AO1 is basically, do you know something and can you write it down? That's all it really is, basically. So you've learned something during your 2-year course and you can write it down and then the stuff. So obviously very simple stuff, and is obviously where the lower grade candidates will be coming in. Then we get on to taking something AO2. Do you know something and could you put it into a new scenario? In other words, can you apply that knowledge you've got? Maybe you know how to do a database. So you've learned how to do databases, and now you're going to actually apply that database to something that we've asked you to do in the exam, to a real life, well, not real life, but a simulated example. Okay, so that's taking what you know and doing something with it. All right, again, so you can see a slight increase in difficulty. AO3 brings in the word analyze and evaluate. And this is where we start to get problems with some candidates who don't understand that as we get up to these higher assessment objectives, a lot more is expected of them than they give us. Evaluate, if you were asked to evaluate something, I mean, obviously the classic example of that nowadays is the, you've just been to a hotel and they want you to do feedback on it, or you've just collected something on shopping and they want feedback on that. And that is the simplest type of evaluation. In other words, on a great scale of 1 to 5, how do you rate our hotel, or how do you rate our shopping experience, or whatever it might be? So that's the simplest type of evaluation, basically just a ranking. But straight away, it gives you a clue as to how this one is going. It is more than just knowing, far more than just knowing. It's being able to see something and then say, well, actually, this is better than that. Right, I could have done this this bit of HTML this way, but it's a bit clumsy. And if I'd done it differently, I could have been more efficient. I could have got it better done, and so on. My database is okay, but it's actually quite hard to see how you would actually do the data entry. I haven't done that very well, so that could be better. So basically, analyze and evaluate is looking at a problem you've got, something you've done, and then giving reasons why it's happening. Okay, if you were here for the ICT GCSE, you know that one of my examples of getting through this is my experience as a teacher in Wales many years ago when students were late arriving to school. And if you ask them, why are you late? Their response will always invariably be, it's only now I have arrived. Now, if you think about it, that actually isn't an answer to the question at all. It's pretty evident that they have only just arrived, because that's why you're asking why they're late. So you are trying to get them to do a bit more information than that. You're trying to pull out from them a bit more information. So you say, well, what's that about? And they say, I missed the bus. Now you're moving from an AO1 objective where you have got basic just knowledge, I've just arrived, that's it, to where you're starting to get some sort of explanation. And then they think, well, okay, well, why did you miss the bus? Burrowing along a bit further. And they say, oh, my alarm clock didn't work. Okay, so now we have got something that's going to be basically into the sort of level of AO2, AO3-ish. But then you could take it a little bit further, especially at A level, and say, what would be a better solution then to get here on time? In other words, now you're starting to analyze the problem. My alarm clock's not going off. Okay, so what can you do about that? How can you make it better? What could you do to make sure that you didn't miss the bus, so to speak? And so that goes on to the sort of levels of AO4. Applying a problem. Hope you can just see the way that's developing anyway, from knowledge, I've just turned up, to, well, what can we do to make this better, which is what AO4 is really about. Analysis and evaluation to design a solution, to come up with a better solution than we had before. Okay, so those are your 4 assessment objectives, and we will later on today, but mostly on Thursday, we'll look at the language that goes with those different levels of things to do. In other words, there are key words that will help identify, am I dealing with AO1 or am I dealing with AO2, right? But basically, if you want to simplify into a few words, AO1 is about recall. AO1 is about recall. AO2 is about application, right? AO3 is about evaluation, and AO4 is about design, right? Design. So that's basically, in one word, is what you're getting for each of those 4 things, okay? Okay, that's the important bit to get in there. Right. The paper splits up, over here on structure of assessment, the paper splits up into 4, the qualification splits up into 4 papers. There are 2 2-hour written examinations for Unit 1 in the first year of the course, and for Unit 3 in the second year of the course. Then there are 2 practical sessions, Unit 2 dealing primarily with HTML and issues like that, and Unit 4 dealing primarily with databases. Given that, though, there is also some element of the material, the knowledge for Unit 2 is in Unit 1, and there is some knowledge taught in Unit 3, which will support Unit 4. So there's overlap between the units, they're not clear-cut. You will get some database work in Unit 1, all right, and so on, and again, you'll also get some more database work in Unit 3 to support Unit 4. It's our intention that you deliver Units 1 and 2 in the first year as an AS, and you deliver the Units 3 and 4 as the A level finally in the second year. So how does that knowledge spread out? Right. So basically we have recall. If you go for the total A level, that's the right hand column, this column over here on the right, it is about 17%. Application is about 38%. Making judgments, AO3, is about 12% overall. And analysis and evaluation is about 33%. So the 2 biggies you can see straight away when you're looking at this are practical things. So in this sense, if you're looking to think about, is this course suitable for me? Or perhaps more importantly, are my candidates suitable for this course? You need candidates who are good at applying what they know and analyzing what they know. and designing new solutions. You also notice a split between AS, the first year, and A2, the second year. In other words, knowledge recall becomes much less significant in the second year. Application becomes much more important, as does design, which takes up a big part of the second year and is obviously reflecting the importance of paper 4. Right. What have we got to do here? Well, let's just quickly review the content. This is pretty straightforward, but I should point out there's a very important proviso with this. Two things. This qualification was written about 5-6 years ago. Things may have changed in the world of IT in that time. Well, not may have, they have. Things have changed in the world of IT in that time. So is an expectation that whilst we will only ever ask specific questions on things which are specifically mentioned in the syllabus. So in other words, we would only ask a question on, for example, security on something that has been mentioned in the syllabus already. We would expect candidates to show evidence in their exemplification of new developments at different points. So one of the things you need to understand is it's not a static syllabus. This is not a static syllabus. It is an evolving syllabus. It has to be by the nature of the actual content we are dealing with. And so therefore, as certain things become more important in the world of IT, especially at the moment, network security probably being a much bigger example, whilst we wouldn't suddenly ask a new question out the blue on something that's not on the syllabus, we would look for a really good candidate drawing in relevant exemplification from recent years. That said, of course, some things don't change much. Hardware is still hardware. There hasn't been much, there's been some evolution in that, but that's pretty straightforward. And software is still software, and we're still probably all still using Microsoft Office. And we probably, most of us might be using Dreamweaver and so on like that. And those haven't changed much over the years, but they are still there. So that's fine. In terms of topic 2 in Unit 1, networks, we would be looking at design and security very much these days. So the emphasis is now looking at not just, okay, here's an academic discussion of a network, how it's structured, how it's arranged, what the plus and minus things about it, but actually we were looking at in an applied context. Where would you use the different type of networks? Which would be most appropriate in a particular situation? The online environment, on the other hand, compared to topic 1, is drastically changing all the time. And so we would expect candidates to have a very good concept of what the whole World Wide Web is about, and operating online and cloud computing and security, but again, in the context of the modern day and some of the issues that are arising from that. Topic 4 is IT systems, but here it's very important to understand we as used in business. If you look at the specification, you'll see that the IT systems are as used in business. We sometimes see centres putting a lot of emphasis on studying their own internal IT system. Now, there's nothing actually wrong with that, but it's not really a business application in the wider sense. And so we would be looking at issues of, if I'm using an IT system in the field, how would that different to me using an IT system in the office? If I'm using IT systems that need certain qualities, like being rugged or waterproof and stuff like that, how does that work? And how do we then plan to incorporate all this into our data flow? The spec includes 2 things, and here is the first of my several important things to watch out for. A data flow is not a flow chart. However, it does seem for a lot of students that they think it is. So please, will you hammer into them the difference between a data flow diagram and a flow chart diagram? All right. This is one of those areas where we're often thinking, oh, goodness sake. You can see a real problem for some centres where candidates have gone the wrong way in a question. They've been asked for a data flow, they've done a flow chart, and basically that means they've knocked out all the marks for that question because it's just totally the wrong answer. So that is one of the things which you would really want to be looking at under the IT systems topic, and also design of systems. Okay. Topic 5 is a supporting topic for Unit 2, right? Sorry, Unit 4. It's a supporting topic for Unit 4. So whilst it does data and databases in a more sort of academic knowledge way, it is opening the door towards the work you're going to be doing in the second year on Unit 4. And then this wonderful broad catch-all category at the end of Unit 1 called wider issues. And the point here is that you may say, well, how do I know what to do here? It doesn't really matter. The questions on topic 6 will always be addressed in a very general way, allowing you to bring in your own exemplification. So if it's an issue, for example, of environmental problems, we might ask candidates to discuss ways in which the disposal of IT equipment can be better handled in terms of the environment. And so that would be a case of a simple generic statement, which we would expect candidates then to exemplify by specific examples. So they would go on then to try and exemplify their answer using local examples to where you are, perhaps, national examples, examples from other parts of the globe. Certainly doesn't have to be based, and certainly doesn't have to be Eurocentric. We wouldn't want that. We'd be very much more interested in a candidate talking about something there. And it also includes the legal, moral, and ethical issues, which will obviously differ from country to country. So we don't expect you to understand the legal requirements of the UK computer technology legal requirements. We're happy to see you talking about the situation in your own country, your own situation. So that's Unit 1. Unit 2 is pretty straightforward. I really don't think there's much we can say about that, except when we get to topic 10, right? And topic 10 is very important because we notice it's designing web pages, not making. Please emphasize this. It's not making web pages, it's designing web pages. And we would expect candidates to show, therefore, some element of design in their work. They will somehow bring together thinking about, well, how am I going to lay this page out? You've all seen it, I'm sure, the well-designed, well-thought-out web page compared to the person just, I'll just slap a lot of stuff down here on the page, it all works, what's the problem? So accessibility would come in here. I've designed a web page, but how good is it for the visually impaired? How good is it with people with motor difficulties? Does it, and so on. These will all be questions that could come up in the design part of it. And semantic web might be an odd, but it's basically how do we better describe a web page? How do we describe a web page for visually impaired? How would we do that? What are we going to do if there's a visual element to the web page, a video, for example? What do we do for people who haven't got any hearing? How are they going to cope with that? So that sort of all comes under the semantic web, and how can we better use the internet and so on. Then Unit 3, manipulating data, straightforward enough, I think, anyway. And obviously you can see where this is heading. This is taking you towards Unit 4. It's another topic that supports Unit 4, and so on. And then we have enabling technologies. And here you're starting to get really looking at how AI is coming on hugely, of course. Although when we first produced this, we'd be looking at other ways in which technology could help people do things. And obviously, we have evolved over time. Using ICT in organizations, I would very much underline the word organizations. Right, I would put, I don't know if I can actually do it, but this word here is we got to look at real examples. Now that can be your school or your centre, but hopefully, very much hopefully, you will have moved further afield This is where perhaps you want to have a link with a local organisation that you can actually study their IT systems and see how it goes. Topic 15 introduces project management and all the aspects of project management, systems development, and so they're having a good idea of that area. And topic 16, rather like earlier on, emerging technologies, the stuff we don't know about yet, the stuff that's starting to appear and might be relevant. Then for Unit 4, we have the database. Basically, that's Unit 4. It's all to do with all the aspects of databases. And we want to point out it also features not just use, but design, evaluate, weigh up. Okay. Right. Within the spec, don't worry, don't panic. I'm not going to go through breaking down every one. But if you go into the spec, each of those topics is then broken down into subtopics, all right, and clarification content. So that's just to point that out. Okay, you've been listening to me very graciously for just about 30 minutes. We're going to have a short break now and an activity. For this, you need your delegate booklet that you've downloaded, and you're looking for activity 1 in the delegate booklet, which will look something like this, right? That's just the start of it. Here are some questions that have been created by teachers for use in the classroom. Given what I've just said, can you decide which unit they go with? Okay, you can say, oh yeah, and we've just posted the link again in case anyone needs it. It's in the chat window if you need it. And basically, I want you to go through these, decide which unit they go with, and then looking at the question, I'd like you to make some notes, basically, about how you might actually achieve that, or what is there a problem with it, or is there how my students go about it. And we're going to give you 10 minutes now to 1:45 to have a look through that, and also take a little bit of a break from the screens for me and my voice, so it lasts. So we're going to resume at 1:45 when we look at some potential answers. Now then, please don't cheat, because the answers are actually there in your booklet. Okay, they're on later pages in the delegate booklet. So once you've done it, by all means then refer to the answers, and we can talk briefly about that as well. But initially, please just go through it, decide what you're thinking, and then you can turn on, I think it's on the next page actually, it's on page, oh, I have lost the page number, but the answers are there in your delegate booklet, so you can start looking at those as well. In the meantime, if a question has occurred to you, please will you then post that in the chat, and I will look at those questions, and I will deal with the questions when we resume at 1:45 the hour. 1:45 the hour. Thank you, folks. What we're asking to do is to take the activity 1 in the delegate booklet, which you could have downloaded from the resources tab on the bottom of the screen. So if you joined us late, go to the resources tab, which is at the bottom menu bar towards the right hand end. If you can't see it, the resources tab, click on the more button, and that will bring up the resources tab. Having clicked on resources, go to documents, which is the second tab in the resources window, and you can then see one of them is the delegate booklet. Download the delegate booklet, and, well, along with the other resources, and the spec if you need it. And what we're asking you to do then is to look at each of these questions and decide which unit of the spec they come from, which unit of the spec do they come from, and any observations about the questions that you think are worth making in terms of, this might be, is this a good assessment? Is this pedestrian? Is it too easy? Is it too hard? Would it be a problem for your students? And if so, why? It's just basically there to get you some idea of a feel for the specification. Hope that helps anyone that's wondering what they're doing. We've got another 5 minutes, and if anyone joined us late, by the way, I should point out this is being recorded, and afterwards, within a couple of days, you will be sent a link to the recording so you can catch up on the stuff you might have missed. Okay, folks. Back in about 4 minutes' time. Okay, people, you've had a chance to look, and I'm just going to answers going up on here. If you go through to your booklet, you'll find that the answers are on the following pages. And we're just going to look at those. So you're looking at the page numbering. It should be page. Oh dear. No, I can't find. Anyway, it is in the booklet. You can see, obviously, it's filled in. It's the thing you just seen, and it's now filled in. So have a look at that, please. And we obviously, the first one we have got there, a unique learner ID. All right, we did for you. That was in the exemplification, if you remember there. Okay, and then we have got a school runs a database, and we want to think that will be from Unit 1 of the course. Preparation theory and stuff like that. Explain a difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Well, explain questions are interesting because they are give a reason, and we have got a valuable word here to mention, by the way, very much valuable word for you to mention, and that is because. If you have an explain question like the difference between symmetric and asymmetric, then thinking about can I use the word because somewhere in my answer, right, is a very good thing to do because there we are, it's got because in it. It forces you into doing some sort of evaluation, giving a reason. So therefore, you can say that they are different because they use different encryption keys. So that would be a good way of getting to it. Or you can just make it as example there, just makes a basic straightforward statement. But do think about explain answers. Question 4 is another explain answer from Unit 1 about application software, so on. Question 5 is HTML, so it's pretty obvious where that's going, in which unit. So that's in Unit 2. Straightforward. And then the last one is about IT networks, right? And it's a theory, and also notice it has the word right. So we're going to look at these command words later on, but a command word like right is really like a very easy answer. You're just going to basically give me some information, basically. And that's all we're asking them to do. However, to do that, they might have to have an awful lot of knowledge. So right, to be able to write an SQL statement isn't just like something they can do out of the blue, but they're not asked to evaluate it, they're not asked to weigh it up, they're not asked to think any more specific about that. We're just saying, okay, can you do this? Can you do a statement like that? And if you can, you're going to get the marks. And that will be how I mark. Again, we'll do all the marking and things like that in the next session. We won't be dealing with that now. Okay. Planning for teaching. Okay. Guided learning hours. If you've joined me for any other training I've been doing this last couple of weeks, you'll know how much of a pet hobby horse this is. A guided learning hour is a time when the student is receiving instruction or supervision from a qualified teacher relating to the topic they're doing. So guided learning hours are obviously the classroom hours, the time you spend in the classroom teaching your students, or maybe your students are engaged in an activity and you're assisting them, working with them, helping them on available. Guided learning hours does not mean homework time. It does not mean working in a study centre unsupervised. The key word there, the very important key word is guided. And there basically is 180 hours for each year, although we all recognise that possibly your second year will not be as long as your first year in terms of how much time you got it. Some very fortunate places, they start the sixth form, the A-level course, at the end of the GCSEs. So the candidates come back from GCSEs and they spend a few weeks of the summer term starting then before you even get to the autumn term. In unfortunate circumstances, you may find that due to when the dates of holidays fall, that in fact in the second year you've only actually got 2 terms in reality. You haven't got 3 terms. So this requires a bit of thinking about, and certainly given the complexities of Unit 4, you might actually want to think in terms of bringing some of the A level Unit 3 and Unit 4 into the first year at the end, after they've sat the exams. So anyway, it works out notionally 3 hours per week per unit. If you've not got that time, and if you're near, fine. If you maybe got 2.5 hours per week per unit, just about okay. But if you've got 2 hours per week per unit, you've not got enough time. And one of the things you need to do, all right, one of the things you need to do is basically go and put together, all right, a case with your senior management team, because you've got to cover yourself here. You've got to say, look, hang on, the spec actually says I need this amount of time, and you've only given me 2 hours a week for each unit. So when someone comes back to you and says, well, you didn't do very well, and you said, well, you didn't give me enough time. It's a very good arguing point to do. So please make sure you think about that in terms of your planning. Look at those guided learning hours. Probably in the first year, you want to get in round about 200, 220 hours, so you have a bit more breathing space in the second year. Anyway, what do we offer you? Well, we have schemes of work which are editable. Okay, so there's schemes of work there. You can just download them from the website and basically then modify them to suit your particular circumstances. That's fine. And we have another little activity, rushing straight up. Isn't it good? But this is the one to, before we go on to the really, actually, I think it's good, sir. So in your delegate booklet, activity 2, planning activities, all right, you can see, right, we have a question from Unit 4. Be able to evaluate the appropriateness and effectiveness of a user interface and justify features in relation to a given problem. So that's taken direct from the spec. It's one of the spec items. And what we want to get you to think about is that there is an important word here, assess. Now, this word, all right, is very, very effective in terms of weighing up. We want to look at this word as being, we can have other words for it which might like it to go. So, for example, alternative words to assess could be appraise, gauge, judge, weigh. Notice how they all basically involve some sort of weighing up and so on. If you go to appraisal, you would, for example, be saying, yeah, you've done this good, but perhaps that wasn't so good. If you're gauging, you might be saying, well, you've made good progress here, but not there. If you're judging, you're basically saying, yes, no, is this right? Is that wrong? What's the good thing? If you're weighing it up, you're saying, well, yeah, there's a lot of evidence here, and so on. So assess, appraise, gauge, judge, weigh are very high order commands. And they therefore expect, right, the candidate to do something quite significant with them. So what we're asking you to do, basically, again, for just on 10 minutes, is how would you organize a lesson that would bring out that quality of assessment? Okay, we're going to assume that the subject content is assumed. We'll just assume that's there, not really worried about that. But what would you do that would encourage your students to develop these skills of assessment? What could you do in the classroom that would get them to do things? And if you haven't done so already, just write down those words I've just given you. All right, appraise is one, gauge, judge, weigh. All right, they're all synonyms of assess. You could also have determine, estimate, fix. So how would you get your candidates to deliver something from your teaching that demonstrates this idea of weighing up, this assessment idea? So what we're looking for is a series of short statements. maybe half a dozen statements about how you would, all right, prepare this lesson and how you would make it reflect the requirement, right, to do it. What could you do? And again, 10 minutes max, of which you're meant to spend a few minutes away from the screen because you've been on screens for an hour. So it's also your screen break from looking at a monitor. When we resume at 10:05, 10:05. And again, the answers are in your delegate booklet, although I'm a bit worried that someone has put there are no answers in the delegate booklets. If that's the case, I will organise something now. Can someone put into chat, in your delegate booklets, there should have been the answers. If they're not there, I can arrange for that now. Okay, thank you. So there's no answers to delegate booklet. Oh, great. That's another little problem. Okay, I can sort that out. I'll organise that now while you're getting on. Okay. Don't worry if you can't hear anything. There was nothing to hear just then. We are basically going behind the scenes at Pearson's trying to get you the answers to activity 1 and get them put into the download. I do apologise for them being missing from your book. Unfortunately, I have a trainer's booklet and I assumed it had the same content as your delegate booklet. My fault, I'm afraid. Anyway, we can do activity 2 because thankfully it is actually on the slide. Can people hear now? People say they can't hear anything now. Are we all right? It should be audible. I have clicked on the microphone. But actually, I notice... We can hear. Okay, great. I don't know what's happened to some people. If you can't hear... Oh, gosh, no point. They can't say they can't hear. Because someone text... I think... we're a bit busy trying to work out, but Adeline, if you could put in a text to people if they can't hear, they might want to log out and log back in again. That often works. That's a way of solution. Yeah, so yeah, put a message to them, log out, log back in. Anyway, here are the answer to activity 2. All right, and this is maybe interesting because you're thinking, hang on a minute, the first statement here has got nothing to do with IT, but it's really important. You do need to actually, especially as quite a lot of our candidates are going to be people where English is their second language, we do need to explain some of these words and not just assume they know what it means. So, for example, the keyword assess, and we're going to look at keywords later on, not necessarily today, but next on Thursday. And what do they mean? So I spent a bit of time talking to you about that when I sent you this idea, this assessment. So the lesson could start with a key word, explain it. Then you might need to exemplify, right, what an assessment is. You could do it through very modern things like, for example, a feedback on TripAdvisor or something. That's a good example of an assessment in a way that can be used. So it's very modern, contemporary, and so on, right? So the first 2 bullet points there got absolutely nothing to do with data entry forms at all. Then you might go on to look at how data entry forms might work. All right, what's going to be important in them, how they are laid out, how they would absorb, take in the information you want to give, how they may be filtered in the sense of making sure you can't put the wrong stuff in and so on like that. And you might get a small group to work and research that idea. You then provide a data entry form for learners to assess. And notice that word assess again. So you are there saying, okay, guys, weigh this one. Here's a data entry form. What's wrong with it? And that's a sort of question you could easily ask of a lot of things you're doing. In other words, it makes a good question. Here's a completely rubbish data entry form. What's wrong with it? And how can it be improved? So you're purposely doing it wrong so candidates pick up what's wrong with the data entry form. And then you might split and produce a better version of the data entry form, the one you have had. That was just a sort of little aside, short break, and so on. Okay, assessment. Let me explain this. This also, what I'm saying now, applies to paper 3 as well. So paper 1, the unit 1 paper, and the paper 3, the unit 3 paper, both have the same qualities here. So just assume. All right. The basic point is it's a 2-hour written examination at a certain time. Okay, so on a certain date, they have to do it, basically. All the questions are mandatory. All the questions require written response. The question types can vary, and that will also affect how it's marked. And the question design will vary as well. We use a sawtooth approach to question papers like this. Now, what a sawtooth approach means is that basically each question increases in difficulty as it goes on, and the next question starts again at a low level, but not as low as the first question, and goes to a slightly higher level than the previous question. So, for example, the first question might cover the very bottom grades of the GCSE at the A level, make the very bottom A level grades, and actually not have anything in that question for people who are A stars, A's, and things like that. The second question gets a little bit, goes back to the beginning, if you like, almost. So it goes back to being fairly easy and gets that a little bit more difficult. And by the time you get to question 5, you might be starting at grade C as your lowest, right, type of qualification here, and extending up to A star. So there is a sort of a ramping up as it goes along. So the first thing you need to explain to your students is, especially the weaker students, is that go for the start of each question. As soon as you find yourself running out of ability to answer a question, move on. Go for another question. And for your most able students, do not waste much time on the early questions. Get your answers in and make sure you're heading towards the later questions, because that's where you're going to earn the marks towards the higher grades. So you're directing them to do so. These papers are, as you probably aware from other exams, I'll get posted off to Hellaby in Yorkshire, where we have our scanning facility. There's a picture of it later. And basically each paper is scanned, and then, having been pre-designed, the questions are separated out so that a marker does not see the whole paper. Multiple choice questions go off to the computer to mark. And we'll need to point out, in a minute, I'll talk about a problem with those. Short answers, which often have a very straightforward answer scheme, mark scheme, go off to clerical markers. They are people who are graduates but not necessarily experts in IT. And all the other answers and the practical answers go off to a specialist IT examiner, teacher, for them to mark. But no one is going to see the whole paper. All right, the whole paper is not seen by one person. Just as we mentioned multiple choice, over the years we have had a few problems where people change their mind. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. It's when you start changing your mind again the problem is. So the paper is quite clear, the instructions are quite clear what to do if you change your mind once. But if you want to go back to the original answer, what do? Well, in that case, write in, alongside the multi-choice, write in the answer you want to have accepted. So if it's become a mess on the multiple choice, just say, I want to have option A marked, or I think the answer is option B, or whatever it might be. Some sort of text there. And so because there's some writing alongside the multi-choice, it will alert the system that they need to then get someone to look at that and see what's happened. Okay, so just that's a small point on that anyway. Okay, Unit 2 and Unit 4, all right, they share the same sort of problems, although they're slightly different. Okay, and we need to deal with all these sort of things as we're going. All right. Okay, so how will these work? Well, first of all, prior to the exam, right, you will have received from Pearson the various files you need for doing this work. And these will be named by the question number. So, for example, you may get a file which is named question 3B. Okay, and presumably, hopefully, all your candidates will twig that's what they got to have to use to answer question 3B. Okay, so an example is given you a question which involves opening up a file. So where do you put these files? Well, the files need to go into a folder for the students, but please, good practice is to create 2 folders, one for the files and one for backups of the files, so that if they get completely messed about, they can go back and start with a fresh, unadulterated original file. So therefore, candidates have a folder with all the required files in, and they have a second folder with the same files in, but labeled backup, reserve, right, use in an emergency, whatever you want to put it, so that they have that second file available if they have to go back. It's very, very important when they have finished doing work on any files that are provided, that they add in the word finished. Now, if a centre uploads files, the examiner will look at the finished files first. Just occasionally it happens, and we have no idea why, but it does, that the candidate has decided to actually go ahead and make some changes after they have done their finished file, and weirdly they've forgotten about that, and they've actually worked from their original HTML file that we gave them. So we will always check all files to see if there's additional work that's somehow been misplaced. It's not in the right place in the system. But for all our sanity, it will help hugely if you make sure your candidates upload the right file at the end of the system. Now, they are going to basically have a collection of files, and we would like those to be uploaded by the centre to one folder for each candidate, which is then named with the centre number, candidate number, and candidate name. So the folder for each candidate has the centre number, the candidate number, and the candidate name. And immediately after that, at the next level down, is the work. This year especially, and I have no idea why, we were getting lots of places where, in fact, the folders were of multiple levels. So the candidate would have a centre name, centre candidate number folder, yeah, fine. But when you opened it, you found that you then had to click down 3, 4, 5 levels to actually get to the work. And that is extremely frustrating. We have to do it. We just put up with it. But it allows more and more scope for things to get lost along the way. So please try to keep it as simple as possible. Once each folder is done, it needs to be compressed or zipped and uploaded to Learner Work Transfer as a single folder. Now, Learner Work Transfer is the platform on which you send us any electronic work. All right, so this is where we will be expecting to receive, all right, the folders that go with the paper itself. And you cannot add to your Learner Work Transfer file, all right, which is a very important thing to understand. Once you've uploaded it, it's locked. Understandably, this is for reasons of security. So if there is a problem, you will need to go back to Pearson's and say, okay, sorry, didn't get that quite right. Can you allow us to get back to our files? And the only thing we can let you do is download the whole lot back to your centre and then do a fresh upload. We can't let you just add stuff to it. So it's not the end of the world, but it obviously gets a bit more complicated, and it makes a lot more sense to try and get it right at the start if you can. Okay, that will be really good. And I should point out, you as a centre have got all those files, and certainly we have no problem with you checking those files to make sure they are the correct files to go off, right? That there's no blank folders left there. If we come across a blank folder, if it's for an early question, we'll often come back to you and say, look, hang on, there doesn't seem to be any digital evidence for question 1 here from candidate so-and-so. All right, and you have the opportunity to go back into your files and say, oh, yeah, sorry, look, we found it, here it is. If it is a blank file for a final question, then we tend to assume that the candidate hasn't got there, that they haven't got, so we're less likely to chase it up. Now we'll talk about Results Plus in a minute, where you can obviously still sort those things out if they happen. I'll explain that to you in a minute. So that's how that's done. Obviously the paper part of question paper 2 and unit 4 paper, it goes off in the same way as before, but this time all the work is marked by one examiner. So one examiner looks at your whole candidate's work. So I did say Unit 3 is the same as Unit 1, so I won't dwell on that. And Unit 4 is the same as Unit 2. Basically, same rules apply and so on like that. Okay. This is a classic. Right. Where does candidates lose marks that they don't deserve to lose? And one of the most classic ones is when we open their HTML document, there are no images. They've gone and used absolute referencing, all right, for the images, and therefore it's there. Now, I should point out the students have got to get this right. This is not something you can correct for them afterwards, all right? It's very important you understand that. You can't go in and think, oh, God, they got it wrong, let's change the referencing. If they haven't done it correctly, it's too late. And so do make sure that the candidates understand the importance of absolute referencing being a no-no for images. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. They've got to have relative referencing. Equally, a second thing is they've got to make sure they put them in the right folder. So here's an example of a candidate doing something, and unfortunately, the photos, the images, weren't in the right folder. So this, again, is something you can't correct for them. They have, as part of the exam, it's part of the assessment, right? And we'll see how it goes. Right, sorry, I've just got a message through about the missing activity 1, but we haven't got it yet. Okay, we're still trying to get it. Okay, so that's hopefully 2 little things that can go wrong there. Unit 4. Now this one is going to need a lot of explanation. Truncation is a nightmare. If you look at this example here, you might first say, well, yeah, what's the problem? Well, the problem is we can't see all the fields in the top image there, and that will be a major problem for us. But we can see in the lower image, we can see down here that they have finished their search criteria. There's a blank just there on the right. We can now see clearly that's a blank column. So we know that this is the sum total of their search criteria. Okay, they're what they're doing, and we can see that. But we don't know here, we can't see what other fields are involved. Right, so this is important. The candidates have to make sure not just they don't truncate things, right, but they also make sure we can realize that they have finished. Now the next problem is that the titles here have been truncated. We've got that one's okay, but these we don't know the full thing here, the field. So we've got another problem with fields. So these columns are not wide enough to show the full field name. Okay, right, sorry, just wait a second. Sorry, my morning coffee has just arrived. I'm sure you're all jealous. All right, so this is very important when they are doing the screenshots for the database work, that they do 2 things, that we can definitely, clearly, unambiguously know which fields they're talking about, and we can also clearly see that the work has finished, the search criteria, whatever it is that they're using is finished, that there's visible empty column there. Okay, now this has given me a bit of a nightmare because the activity 3 is a lovely one. It's here is the marking. You should have downloaded from the documents. You should have been able to download something called activity 3 RTF, rich text file. Okay, because Zoom won't allow us to download HTML files. Okay, so that's a wonderful joy of Zoom, one of the problems we discovered with it. However, if you go into the document section, you should be able to see in documents. Oh no, it was on a link, wasn't it? Sorry, Eileen said it was on a link. She's posted a link to it. Sorry, I remember we were trying to work this out before we started today. So use that link, which is in the chat window, to access the file. All right, and that's the best way we can do it. I'd like you then to resave that as an HTML file and to open it. Right, so it's a very simple, very short HTML file. Okay, to open it. So open it as an HTML file and then apply the mark scheme that you see on the screen now. Apply the mark scheme which you see on the screen now. right? And it's a short activity, this, 5 minutes, say. 5 minutes. Let's see if we can all do it. Let me know how you're getting on. All right. I'll talk about, someone's asking about course books. I'll talk about that shortly. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take out the PowerPoint slides and put up instead, right, what you should have happened when you use the HTML code. And this is what you should have got. Okay, so there you are. We've run the HTML code. If you haven't managed to do it so far, I've just done it for you. And what we've got there is some images, and we're going to go, oh dear. Obviously, first of all, the images weren't put into the folder, so that's a small problem. However, if you roll over them, you'll notice that the little icon in the top left-hand corner does do as we ask. It does go to 50%. Okay, so that's an interesting problem. All right, if we then go to look at the source code, here we can see what the problem was, that they obviously had used relative links there for the very images they had to put in. But going back up through the code, you'll see that they have correctly set the opacity to 0.5. They have done that in the coding there. And it's actually working on the little icon in the corner. So that's going to be so. So when we come to credit it, so I'll stop that one and go back to the slide. This one. In this mark scheme, all right, the candidate has been asked to do something. Now, they've not made it work, but the question says, add code to enable the fade effect. And so therefore, if they have added the code to enable hover and fade to take place, they'll get 2 marks. So you might want to point out to the students, therefore, even if they do, for example, get things wrong, that they might get some marks, because we will examine the code to see why their actual visual marking didn't work. And so 1 mark for hover, 1 mark for 0.5. I hope that makes sense. Okay. there's something wrong with this slide. I'll leave you for a minute, just a minute, to work out what's wrong. Yeah, going back to the person, who was it? Sorry, Nancy. Nancy was asking, they get 4 points even when it's not written properly. Yes, because it worked. All right. And so for this example, all they were asked to do was to, when the mouse hovers over the image, it has 50% opacity. That did happen. So they've met the criteria, even though they haven't got the images. All right. And it's probably not coded wonderfully. Okay. Yeah. That was put in. We'll look at lots more of these next on Thursday session. Okay. Who spotted the problem? Well, apparently Unit 1s have 1.5 seconds per mark. Therefore, if they had a 20-mark question, they've got roughly 30 seconds to answer it in. So I think you realise that should have read 1.5 minutes per mark, right? Not 1.5 seconds. But there we go. So first of things is, have you ever done this with your students? Have you sat them down and said, look, let's look at, see how much time you should be allocating to each question? And they should be doing some maths. And if they find that they have gone over the time for that question, they ought to move on, because there might be better chances of earning marks from other questions than trying to worry at a question where probably they've got some problems. So timings are important and important to guide. And we'll talk about something else in a minute in relation to that. Okay, in the spec, you will find these towards the back of the specification, the command words. And again, it's a very strange thing to think about, but you're going to have to spend some time teaching English, all right? And that may seem a strange thing to do, but they need to know what these words mean, okay? So I've just an example of some of them there, but do spend time sitting down with your students and saying, well, if we see this particular command word in a question, what are we going to do in response to that? How are we going to deal with it? All right. And some words are very simple, like complete, for example, which just requires you to finish off a diagram, table, algorithm, whatever it might be, right? Other ones are incredibly difficult, as we pointed out earlier, like analyze and recommend. So study command words, work through your students, all the command words, make sure they understand. They're the only words they're going to get in the exam paper, but they need to know what's happening. A trend of recent years has been the concept of walking, talking mocks. I'm not sure why it says units 1 and 3. You can do it for all of them. But basically, the students get themselves into an exam room situation. You introduce the exam paper, which might be an example you've got or one you've made up. They are then literally walked through each question on the paper. So the person who's doing the session takes them through question 1, talks about the stages, looks at the command word, looks at what might be needed to be done, talks about that, and then within the time normally expected for that question, the students write their response for that particular question. You then stop, you do question 2 the same way, you talk through question 2, you analyze what's expected, the students then sit down, and within the time allocated for that question, they write their response. People have reported this has been a very successful way of doing a preparation for the exam. Right. We mentioned absolute referencing. That's obviously something they need to do. And we also need to make sure they include an answer. Sorry, I just got a message from Edeline saying, I'm sorry, we don't have the answer to Unit 1. I will do something about that. I will get you a version of Activity 1 answers for Thursday. Okay, by Thursday, I will have worked out some way of getting them. So sorry about the fact that you didn't get the answers for Activity 1. I can see a way of solving that. And I'll give them to you on Wednesday. Thursday, gives you on Wednesday, Thursday. Okay, then we mentioned about screen printing. Please make sure there's no truncation. But more important than that, make sure, in fact, that view of your work goes beyond the area so we can see there's nothing hidden, nothing missing or added that shouldn't be there. Right. Now then, important thing we're going to go there is in papers 2 and 4, and this is really quite complicated at times. We have the problem of rewarding what they can do, not what they've got wrong. And this can lead to the bizarre circumstances of what we call follow through. Okay, a candidate makes a mistake early on in their database task. We don't know what it might be, but they've made a mistake. We now have to assume that that mistake is the right answer. So maybe they've done the search criteria wrong, right? Maybe they didn't quite design things correctly. We're now going to assume for the purposes of following marks that their wrong answer is the right answer. Hope you understand what I'm talking about, right? And so we will then go on to try and reward what comes afterwards as if they had done the first part of it correctly. It's even more mind-boggling when you're actually trying to do it in real life, but we are adopting a principle of we reward marks. Some people say, do we penalize people for doing X or Y? There are no negative marks in the mark scheme. As idiotic or mad as something might seem, we're not going to take marks off because of that. Okay. Right. So we'll go back. Right. Now then, this is the important bit which has changed in recent years, and we need to do a bit of this there. Okay. This is where your support comes from. This table's in the slides, in the PowerPoint you'll be getting, and there are very many different things. Going down the screen, the Getting Started guide is something you can download if you're thinking about doing the subject and get an idea of what you're doing. This is the training event. You're doing that now, so that's there. We have a subject advisor who we will be introducing to you shortly, and who will help you. We have community forums for other schools and centres for the same thing. But equally, you might look at social networking, especially Facebook, right? And you might put in Pearson or Edexcel ICT as a search, and you will find that there are communities online on Facebook of teachers in the UK, and they are sharing materials, information, and sort of stuff like that. So these community forums exist, okay, not just with us, but outside of Pearson's as well, in things like Facebook and Instagram. And so you could go, and people are joining them, and okay, as long as you understand you're an international, so therefore your exams are not necessarily going to be exactly the same as a domestic exam, but there's plenty of stuff there for you to look at and support and get things like that. Schemes of work we are providing on the website. Skills mapping is on the website. Sample assessment materials on the website. And then something which everyone seems to forget. Examiner reports. Right? These are so important. Right? They as the exam progresses, each marker is asked to write down any comments which they think might be helpful to centres. So the examiners write these comments down. They are collated and passed to someone like myself, who was a team leader. I try to summarize the wisdom of those examiners. I then pass it to the chief examiner, who gets reports from several people like me, and they then try to summarize the accumulated wisdom of everybody and produce a report. Examiner reports are published at the same time as results. And you really will find, they are so useful. Download the question paper, download the mark scheme, then read the examiner report to see where things have gone wrong. Okay. Now, there are also other things you can get, and we're going to talk about them here. This is where you look at the web page. Okay. This is where you're going to find everything you want. Notice that I think slightly recently things have changed slightly. This is not for ICT, by the way, I should point out. This is for science, but it's an example of the same thing. Okay, this is how the page works, and you can click around on it in various places and different categories and find all the resources you need. It looks slightly different now. No, foolishly, I've gone and lost the page. I will try and show it to you on Wednesday. Thursday. I'll try and show it to you on Thursday, where it goes. But that's your downloads. Notice sometimes you can't download things because you need to actually log in, and you may have to ask your exams officer for a login or register yourself. Now, Results Plus. It's free, and it analyzes your students' performance in the exam. You can even, if you want to set a mock exam, providing you just use a past paper exactly as is, you don't modify it in any way, you just take a past paper and use it as is, you mark it, you can send the marks in to Pearson's and they will put them into the Results Plus system, which will then analyze the student's performance. The performance comes out as a series of red, amber, green traffic light systems. So in other words, it identifies questions where your candidates did well and were good and got high marks, and it identifies questions where your candidates have done badly. But not only that, you can then split it down by groups. So in other words, maybe you have 4 or 5 groups doing the exam. Then you can compare how one class has done with another class. You can compare how one teacher has done with another teacher. You can compare, even more importantly, how you're doing with other schools in your country. So this isn't with specifics, it's a generic thing. So you might, for example, say, okay, I'm a rural school here with a total school roll of 500 pupils, all right, in my country. We're mixed, male, female. How do I compare? How do my results compare against other rural schools of roughly 500 pupils in my country? And so you can see how you're doing. Now, that was always very useful when you're trying to support arguments for more time, things like that, things to take to your senior management and say to them, look, hang on a minute, we're actually doing a lot better than other schools like us. Or fortunately, of course, it could be the other way around, which probably you wouldn't want to bring to your attention to your senior management team. So it's there. Anyway, so that's Results Plus. That's analysis of the marking literally by every single question and every sub-question and part question. Okay, there you've got a nice little picture of Hellaby where they're scanning the papers, just so you know. Wonderful that. And there a screen where you can see plenty of greens in the analysis, which is fine, but there's a red line there that's in the middle of the screen there which says, oh, there's a question that's iffy, and you can go back, well, why didn't they do? Now that's fine. You can now know that they didn't do very well on question 4B part 1 perhaps, but now you need to know, well, why? What was going on there? So you might go to Exam Wizards, all right, in a minute, come back to that, but you want to go here, come back to the access to scripts. All paper scripts can be accessed by you for free. Okay, obviously you don't get this until results day, but on results day and from then onwards, you can go back in and find out, why did my candidate do so badly on question 4B1? And you can read their answers. And you can think, oh, hang on a minute, that tells us something, doesn't it? They obviously misunderstood the question, or they didn't get the right idea. So you can do that. Now, the only thing it doesn't work for is where you've got digital files. So those files, the digital files, of course, you've got in your center. So what they will give you, instead of the actual script, whether that's the situation, they will give you the mark breakdown, and you can then apply it to the digital file. So again, you go back to look at them there, and you can then see what the mark breakdown is, and you can then apply that to your students. Going back a slide, Exam Wizard is quite clever. Right, this allows you to do a mix and match thing. You can take bits of question papers, and you can, right, using the tool, you can create your own homework assignments, topic tests, mock exams, but most importantly, they come with a mark scheme. All right, so you can take examples that they've from previous papers, you can mix them all up. You can ask the exam wizard to say, right, give me all the questions that have been asked in the exam about topic so-and-so. All right, and then you can see all those. You can put them together into little test paper or whatever you want to do. All right, and you can then use the mark schemes that we use to do it. If you want to pay more, there are active student books and teacher resource packs, which is someone was asking me before. If I move on, here we are. There is this student book. Okay, there are 2 student books for the international. Okay, there's absolutely no reason, of course, why you shouldn't use other publishers. You do not. There's nothing special about our publication that's different to anyone else. So whilst ours obviously is what we'd like you to use, you can use textbooks provided by other providers. You can even, of course, you can move on to do other things and perhaps look at the domestic ASA level textbooks, which are very similar, of course. Okay. Right, teacher resource packs. They're on basically they're things you can purchase. Right, they're very not free, but they can be purchased through Pearson. And this is our subject advisor. And this is very important. Now, in your copy of the PowerPoint slides, this may be wrong. So please, can you make a note now, right? And Arlene's also put it in the chat. Can you make note of the name? His name is Tim Brady. And if you want to get hold of him, you can email him on either teachingict@pearson.com, or if you're also doing computer science, you can contact the same guy on teachingcomputerscience@pearson.com. So he handles both the ICT and the computer science. Now, Tim won't be able to answer your questions, but he will know someone that can. Okay. And so right, Tim can basically point you to the right direction. So any questions you have to do with the qualification, you could address to Tim, and hopefully he will then pass those on to someone who does know the answer to your question and get them to get back to you. There is a phone number there, but I don't honestly think there's much value in using it because obviously Tim's not going to know the answer. He needs time to actually go and find out what the answer is and come back to you. And the pressing question at the moment is about the use of internet during Unit 2 and Unit 4 because some people are now using Chromebooks and they shouldn't really be using the internet. So I'm waiting to get some more answers to that myself. That's an answer I can't give you, I'm afraid. Okay, so that's relevant there. Okay, I did have a nice picture of Tim. I know where he's gone, but never mind. Oh, he's there. There he is. That's Tim Brady. Okay, now we have left about 10 minutes in which you can put your questions. Please put them into chat. Please don't leave it too long because we will be truncated on the top of the hour. So we've got 13 minutes left. So if there are any questions you want to now place, please put them in and so on. And do hang around, don't go yet, to see if there is questions. So I'll answer those as they come in, and they might be relevant to you as well. So now's your chance, get typing, and we'll give people a couple of minutes to type, and then we'll see where we're at.